Hello and welcome to the Under Center podcast. I'm your host, Darren Marr, and I am joined by one of my two co-hosts today, Jake Woolhead. Jake, did you finally have enough and get rid of Fume for good?
Yeah, no, you might have found he fell down the stairs through mysterious circumstances, but yeah, we finally got rid of him.
That's one less Washington fan we have to worry about now in the world, so it's okay. So that's all right. But listen, guys, we have a huge show for you today. We are continuing our off-season series, and today we are delighted to be joined by Andrew Mason from Denver Sports. How are you today, Andrew?
Doing well, gentlemen. How you guys doing?
I can't complain too much. Sitting here talking sports, I love it. I would do this every day if I could.
Yeah, that's
I'm trying to. I'm lucky.
That's it. And it's scheduled release day today. And as we were saying before we went on air there, just trying to weed out what is actual leaks and what are people just trying to get some attention on this day is hard to decipher from.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you've got sort of the two tiers of this. You've got kind of the blue checks on Twitter, the reporters who are covering the team that have stuff, and then there's kind of stuff floating. There's kind of weird stuff floating around. Like there was one today that I saw from somebody who was in Green Bay and claimed that was the home schedule and said that they got it from somebody in the hospitality industry in Northeast Wisconsin because, of course, they want to know, okay, when can we jack up the hotel rates for people coming to visit for Packer home games? I mean, there's just so much crazy stuff out there right now.
Yeah, but two games we are definitely sure of. Well, we got the full week one schedule that we're sure of, but two games other than the week one schedule that we were sure of is the two international games, which is obviously great for us over this side of the ocean, and that's going to be the Miami Dolphins facing off against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then 1 week later is going to be the Atlanta Falcons against the New York Jets. We spoke about it on a show earlier on this week that we kind of hoped that it could have been Washington. Because one of Fiona, our other co-hosts, is a Washington fan, so could have been a fan from the show, could have at least had some interest in the London games. But it's still going to be great, lads, to see football back with crowds, especially on the international stage at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Oh, 100%. And of course, the Broncos, before COVID hit, the Broncos were expected to play the Falcons in London last year. It would have been their first international game in 10 years. I know everyone was pretty excited about that around here, and that got scuttled. And so there was also some hopes the Broncos might be the Jaguars' opponent, but didn't work out. But maybe the Broncos will make themselves a little more relevant and be getting over there, because that's something I hear from a lot of Broncos fans over in Britain and Ireland and then throughout Europe is, hey, when are they coming back? When are they coming back? I mean, it's, I guess I almost said, you almost want to say, hey, if you want to see a team every year, probably should become a Jaguars fan. It might be a little bit better, but in that regard, but hopefully the Broncos be over there soon, because last time I went over there, it was a phenomenal week, really, until the game itself happened for the Broncos. So it's a blast, and you're going to get a couple of good games. I mean, Dolphins, Jaguars, that's really intriguing on a lot of levels, with a couple of good young quarterbacks, presuming that Trevor Lawrence is everything we all expect him to be.
Definitely an exciting game to watch, because you've got these two young guys that are probably going to be stars in the AFC for hopefully a while, make the sport a little bit more exciting. It'd certainly be a game that I would be intrigued to go see if I can manage to get a ticket now.
Yeah.
That's it for sure. But look, we are here to focus on the Broncos today. But before we do, guys, if you are watching this on YouTube, can you please like this video and subscribe to the Under Center podcast channel on YouTube, because that we have just recently set up this channel, and we'd love to get as many subscribers over as we can, and really help us out if you can do that for us. Alternatively, if you want the audio show, just do the same thing wherever you get your podcast. Just search Under Center Podcast. You'll find us there. Subscribe to us there too, and you'll get the audio version of the show whenever we release it. But let's talk about the Broncos, Andrew, and let's actually start with the draft a couple of weeks ago, because the Broncos picked at 9. All the talk before the draft was they were one of the teams that were in the running for a quarterback. Both Trey Lance and Justin Fields' names were mentioned a lot as two players that they actually really liked, but instead they decide to get out of the quarterback race and draft cornerback Patrick Surtain instead. What did you make of their choice at number 9?
Well, I mean, it's a good choice in terms of looking at Pat Surtain in a vacuum and saying, okay, what can this player do relative to the value of the pick? What is his outlook? Pat Surtain, not only probably the most complete cornerback in the class, but playing a premium position. If you're going to have a top 10 pick, ideally you're picking a QB, a corner, a blindside protector at tackle, or an edge rusher. And so Surtain is one of those 4 key guys playing corner. The thing is, though, if you step back and kind of look at it in the big picture and say, okay, the quarterback question looms over everything with the Broncos right now, that's the only way you can kind of question it. And an interesting thing that came out, Joe Banner, a former executive for the Eagles and Browns, now working for the 33rd team, that publication, Banner said that Chicago offered to trade up with Carolina at 8 and then Denver at 9, basically the deal that ultimately the Giants took at number 11. And so if you're the Broncos and that deal came into play, maybe you love Surtain and maybe you only liked Fields, didn't love him enough to take him. But if you could have ended up with a first-round pick from the Bears in 2022 by moving down 11 spots, then you could have been in a position where you had that extra pick that if you're picking a quarterback next year, potentially, you use that extra pick to move up in the draft. If you're trading for Aaron Rodgers, and I know we're going to get into that possibility here in a few minutes, then you're talking about maybe having another draft pick that you can send to Green Bay to make that deal happen and minimize the player capital. And then you could have still gotten a Caleb Farley or a Greg Newsome sitting there at 20. You could have still addressed corner. So that's the only thing to question, not the pick of Surtain, not the player himself, just everything around that, with the Broncos having a roster that appears ready to contend, with the only big question being at QB.
Yeah, definitely. And what could have been a bit of an odd addition in some circles, because the Broncos did try to address the cornerback position in free agency. They got Ronald Darby, they got Kyle Fuller as well, but it was a secondary that really struggled last season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the depth got tested and collapsed completely. You had, of course, you go back to AJ Boye they brought in, and he gets hurt the first game, and then that forces Michael Ojemudia in, and that rookie out of Iowa, 3rd round pick. He had his ups and downs last year, and then you see the injuries happening. Even you had backups that were getting injured. They lose Asang Bassi down the stretch. They lose Duke Dawson to a torn ACL. What they were left with at the end was nothing like they expected to have going the process. Bryce Callahan had a great season when he played. He only played 10 games, of course, and kind of the story of Bryce Callahan's career is that when he's healthy, he's terrific, but he hasn't played a 16-game schedule yet. And so they didn't want to get caught short. Now, the interesting thing with Surtain is that there may not be a role for him in terms of being in the top 3 or top 4 corners unless he pushes the top 3 corners, unless he pushes Kyle Fuller, Ronald Darby, or Bryce Callahan out. But Callahan's injury history suggests that he's going to miss some time. So that will give Surtain a window. You might have to kind of move things around and have somebody else in the slot, but give Surtain a window to step in and play this season. And then Callahan's contract expires. Fuller's on a 1-year deal. It's wide open for Surtain to be a starter by 2022, but still that's not an immediate starter. That being said, in light of the Rodgers thing, if the Broncos have to kind of make some space to fit in everything cap-wise, Bryce Callahan still has a contract that would save you $7.6 million on the cap if you let him go. So that may kind of open up a window for the Broncos to have some flexibility there if they need to make a little more room if and when they bring in Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, that was a kind of an interesting one for me watching the draft, because obviously, like, we kind of watched Drew Lock last year and we said, could he be the guy? I mean, with a little bit of luck and a lot of hard work, he could be the guy. And then I think you brought in Teddy Bridgewater. We know he's already kind of not the guy. So then you go, who can you draft at 9? It could have been Justin Fields, but you draft Patrick Surtain, which, he's a top quality corner, probably the better cornerback in the draft. So now you're thinking, do you stick with your quarterbacks or do you go for a trade with Aaron Rodgers? Because if you, as you said, the Broncos are almost a ready team, a contender team, with the one need being quarterback. So how do you feel about the Aaron Rodgers trade? Do you feel good about what you would have to give up to get him? Because obviously you want to be looking to win a Super Bowl in the next 2 to 3 years if you do trade for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you feel good about the deal. Now, the whole point is, okay, how do you kind of minimize what you're giving up? And if it gets to, say, 3 first-round picks, that may be something that is that proves too rich for the Broncos, even though you're talking about those picks probably being in the 20s to 30s if Rodgers is who you expect him to be. So I think there's a limit maybe the Broncos wouldn't want to go past. And then, of course, there's the whole thing of, do the Packers make him available? If the Packers are stubborn, if they don't accept that Aaron Rodgers probably isn't going to play for them again, and they say, okay, we're going to make you pay back $29.8 million and you just go retire, that has its value as well. But what you could get from the Broncos has value too. And we learned 4 years ago in the Browns Brock Osweiler Texans trade that even a second-round pick is effectively worth $16 million. So if you view it in those terms, the Packers, I think, would look and say, we can get more value in a trade than we could if we just say, okay, Aaron, you pay back the $29.8 million. But yeah, the thing is, in general, the Broncos have been looking at quarterbacks all offseason. They inquired about Matthew Stafford, but the trade offer wasn't in the realm of what the Rams were offering. They looked at the free agent options. Of course, they were on hand. The GM, George Payton, watched Justin Fields, watched Zach Wilson, and didn't see Mac Jones in person, did see Trey Lance in person. So they haven't been acting like a team that is happy with the quarterback position. And even if the Rodgers thing doesn't work out, Teddy Bridgewater has worked with Pat Shurmur, the Broncos offensive coordinator, for 2 seasons in Minnesota. He's not going to take a long time to get up to speed and learn the scheme. And I don't think they would have brought in Teddy Bridgewater if they didn't have some level of trust in him. If it's Bridgewater and Locke, the reps are going to be divided 50-50 in OTAs and training camp, as Vic Fangio has said. And frankly, given how one of the reasons for Locke's struggles last year, guys, was that he lost OTA reps because of the pandemic, I'd say a 50-50 split probably doesn't help out Locke that much and may actually help Bridgewater.
Yeah, and just going back to the situation around Aaron Rodgers, because it all blew up on draft night, and where, I don't know if you noticed at all, but or do you think that the Broncos had thoughts about drafting a quarterback that night, but then the Aaron Rodgers news came out and that they saw that they could be in a good position to trade for him, that they decided to pull the plug on drafting one on night one?
I don't think so. And I think that when they went into that, first of all, it just because it broke on draft day doesn't mean that teams probably weren't aware of Aaron Rodgers being dissatisfied, because you've got, even though there certainly hasn't been any direct contact, these things happen through back channels and intermediaries and so forth. I do think that if Trey Lance had gotten past pick 3, that and had kept going down to pick 6, pick 7, the Broncos, I think, would have been very keen on taking Trey Lance and maybe even moving up a few picks to make sure they got him. It's sort of the thing of, do you like a guy or do you love a guy? I think they liked Justin Fields, but they love Trey Lance. And if he had just gotten a few picks down in the draft, then it wouldn't at all surprise me if the Broncos were out of the Rodgers sweepstakes and Trey Lance was the guy and probably sitting behind Teddy Bridgewater for this year. So it just didn't work out that way. The 49ers ended up taking Lance. I think the 49ers made a very good decision there. Certainly fits their scheme and fits a situation where he can sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo for a year. But if you're going to bring in a quarterback, you gotta love him, basically, especially if you're doing so in the top 10. And I think, as from what I've gathered, Justin Fields, in the end, they liked him, just not enough given everything else in play. And yes, that probably does include the possibility that maybe you end up with Aaron Rodgers, because they want, if it wasn't going to be a competition for the quarterback, then it's something that they wanted a clear upgrade. Rodgers obviously is a clear upgrade for almost any team.
Grant, and let's have a look at the rest of the draft as well. And just quickly, if there was any standout picks for you, because for me, looking at their draft, because you made 10 picks in total, I really liked the Quinn Miners pick, especially in the 3rd round. I thought it was a great pickup for where you could get him.
Oh, that might be my favorite pick of the Broncos in this past draft. And I was down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl in January watching him, and that dude was just a beast, winning one-on-one matchup after one-on-one matchup, which says a lot because the one-on-ones, O-line versus D-line, they don't favor the O-lineman typically. And Miners was flat out dominant. He's, he extremely strong. It starts with his base, and that's where allows him to get a real nice drive off the snap. People focus on the gut. I'm focused on the fact that this guy has so much power coming from his lower body, from his quads, and from the rest of his legs, that he's going to be able to get a nice drive off of every snap. And the other thing that really stands out about Miners is this guy. He shed 20 pounds last year, converted some of that fat into muscle, and did so in a season when he didn't have a season. Division III NCAA. They didn't play last year, so it was all on him to make sure he was ready. He didn't have the games to kind of get ready for on a week-to-week basis. Says a lot about his work ethic and his football character that he showed up at the Senior Bowl and was not only in shape, but you could say was in the best football shape of his life, despite not having a season. So I love that pick. I think he's going to be starting for the Broncos at some point within the next couple of years. They'll find a spot for him. Another pick I really like, you get into round 7, Kerry Vincent Jr. Out of LSU, another guy who didn't play last year. He opted out. LSU had a season in the SEC, and he opted out. But Kerry Vincent Jr. is a slot corner from Central Casting, and if they can kind of sit on him for a year, let him develop, let him kind of knock the rust off from missing last year, he's somebody that I think you could plug in at the slot corner in 2022 and might do very well. Of course, it took a couple of safeties with a lot of potential as well there on day 3, but it's a draft where I think the Broncos did a good job finding some high upside guys as you get into day 3. Jonathan Cooper, actually, a 7th round pick at edge rusher. He's somebody who's undergoing a heart procedure this month. Should be good to go. But he's a guy who would have been a 4th or 5th round pick if he hadn't had the procedure. That's a good dice roll to take there in round 7.
They're the types of guys that you kind of do be looking at in the later rounds, as the guys you can roll the dice with, see if they can contribute at some point and develop. So I think that's a great pickup. One of my favorite pickup with the Broncos was on day 2 was Javonte Williams. I thought that was a fantastic pick. He looked great.
He can do everything, right? I mean, he can get better as a blocker, but I think that'll happen. I think that'll happen just from being around Melvin Gordon, who's a good blocker. But he can make plays in the passing game in space. He makes people miss better than any running back I've seen coming out of college in the last 5 years. It's incredible how many missed tackles that he forces, and he runs hard. To use an expression from the Apple TV show Ted Lasso. He runs like he's angry at the grass, and you can't coach that into a guy. It's just something you either have or you don't. There's no hole in his game, and for the Broncos to get, I think, one of those top tier running backs. To me, there were 3 running backs that separated themselves from the rest of the group, and of course, that's Najee Harris out of Alabama. It goes to Pittsburgh. Travis Etienne from Clemson. He goes to Jacksonville, and then Javonte Williams. Those other 2 guys were first-round picks. The Broncos get Javonte Williams in the 2nd. Had to trade up 5 picks to do it. But if you're getting, I think, first-round talent for a second-round price.
Yeah, and just looking at some of the offense for next season, because whoever is playing quarterback on the Broncos next year is in for, you could say, is in for a treat, because they have some really, really good, dangerous players. You have Cortland Sutton coming back next year, who I really, really like, or really rate highly. I think if it wasn't for injury this last season, I think he would have had a standout year, and I think it probably would have maybe like loosened the pressure on Drew Lock a little bit coming into this year. But also another guy, Noah Fant, is I think on track to be one of the top tight ends, if not this coming season, the season after.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on Noah. And last year got derailed a little bit by an ankle problem that he played through. And also, frankly, this is where kind of the issues at the quarterback position show up. And Drew Lock's got to become more consistent if he's going to be the guy. He, was right there leading the league in a dubious stat, which is percentage of throws that were off target and not catchable for Noah Fant and Jerry Jeudy and the rest of the wide receiver and the pass catching core, I should say. So I think a little more accuracy is going to help Fant out, and certainly, if you look at the Aaron Rodgers possibility, there might not be anybody who benefits more from Rodgers than Noah Fant. We saw last year, you gave Aaron Rodgers Robert Tonyan. He's a double-digit touchdown guy. And if Rodgers gets Noah Fant, I would expect him to be in the 10 to 12 touchdown range this year easily. That's the kind of target that Aaron Rodgers is just going to love if he becomes a Denver Bronco.
Definitely. And how big would the loss of Phillip Lindsay be now this coming year? Because I know Melvin Gordon came in and I think he was sort of okay. I think he didn't hit the heights he had when he was with the Chargers, but he's coming into a second year in this system. He might get a little more comfortable. But Phillip Lindsay was not just a fantastic story, but he was a really good player. But he did complain a little bit about being misused last season.
Yeah, it didn't seem like he was a fit for what Pat Shurmur, the offensive coordinator, wanted to do. It. Shurmur, if given the choice, would like to have one running back be the primary guy on most downs. For example, you go back to 2017 with Minnesota. They start the year with Dalvin Cook, and then Cook gets hurt. So their plan was to ride Dalvin Cook heavily. Cook goes down, then they have to go into a timeshare at running back. Shurmur goes to the Giants in 2018 as head coach. They draft Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley was the very epitome of the every down back in his rookie season. And until he had a little bit of injury issue in 2019, they rode him heavily. So Shurmur wants that one back who can do everything, who can run the ball between the tackles, who can make plays in the passing game, and he can help in pass pro. And Phillip Lindsay, while he's been dynamic in the run game, had some drop issues over the last couple of years when he was involved in the pass game and struggled in pass pro. It's not that he wasn't a willing blocker, but at his size and his skill set, not an effective blocker. And you can look, for example, at some plays last season. I think back to when Drew Lock suffered a strip sack fumble against Buffalo in Week 15. Lindsay misses basically and sets that up. And that's the sort of thing that isn't going to work for Pat Shurmur. So I think Phil is a guy who's probably best used situationally and in different situations than the Broncos were going to afford. So it's just not a good match for what Pat Shurmur wanted to do. Now, of course, if the Broncos struggle this year, they're probably changing coaches and changing offensive coordinators again. And so that might kind of lead you to a dangerous point. You're, bringing in players for a scheme that maybe you're not using anymore. You're doing different things. But at the same time, Phillip Lindsay, he was going into his contract year this year. He was a restricted free agent. Broncos would have lost team control of him after this year because it would have been his fourth season. So maybe it just kind of came to an end. But there were, a lot of people around here disappointed because Phillip Lindsay, high school at Denver South High, University of Colorado, then a Bronco. I mean, he was the local guy made good. And there will always be a lot of pride in Phillip Lindsay, but just didn't really fit what the Broncos wanted to do right now.
Week 1, Andrew, Denver Broncos at the New York Giants. Who are you taking?
Well, it's funny because we've already seen a spread, right? We've seen the Broncos, I believe, are a 1.5 point favorite. I like the Broncos in this no matter who their quarterback is. Obviously, if Aaron Rodgers is the guy, then that number is going to creep up. If it's still Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock, then I think it'll probably settle at about a pick 'em. But I like the Broncos in this game just because no matter who the quarterback is, you look at what they're getting back in terms of injuries from last year. Von Miller didn't play all last year. He's back. You guys mentioned Cortland Sutton earlier. He's going to be back and at full health. Melvin Gordon played well down the stretch last year. Even if Javonte Williams isn't quite ready just yet, he'll be good to go. The secondary is better. The defensive line is back to full health after missing Mike Purcell for a bunch of games last year. He's their nose tackle. And really the offensive line is just kind of status quo. They didn't have Ja'Wuan James last year. They're not going to have him this year because of the Achilles. So kind of across the board, I think the Broncos have enough to win this game. But if it's Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater, I expect a close game. If it's Aaron Rodgers, I think the Broncos are going to win by double digits.
That's a fair assessment to make. If it's Aaron Rodgers, I'll give you the edge, but I can't give you the edge if it's not Aaron Rodgers.
That's fair. That's fair. I see that jersey you got behind you, so I hey,
we'll see. I don't know. Bradley Chubb and Von Miller taking that reconstructed, taking it apart, and Daniel Jones with his fumble issues.
And that's an issue going back to his Duke days. I remember watching him going to the 2019 draft and just put the ball on the ground way too much. And fumbling is one of those things, guys. As you know, if you're a fumbler in college, you're probably still going to be a fumbler in the NFL. I mean, and Drew Lock has issues with fumbles as well. It's actually interesting to look at Daniel Jones and Drew Lock and see how, in some ways, they're kind of on parallel tracks here. And if the Broncos don't get Aaron Rodgers and Drew Lock is the starter this year, he's in the same kind of make or break situation that Daniel Jones is.
That was certainly the reason I was happy getting the first from the Bears for next year, because if he doesn't do well this year, at least we have a little bit of ammo to move up.
Yep. That's where the Broncos, if they don't get Rodgers and Drew Lock isn't the guy, they might be shaking a little bit, because I think this team could have a season like Buffalo did in 2017 with Tyrod Taylor, like Chicago did last year with Trubisky and Foles kind of splitting the time. And that is that type of year where you're now with 17 games, you're say 10-7, 9-8, 8-9, maybe. You sneak into the postseason, but the quarterback isn't the reason why. And I could see if Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater ends up starting, that they're just okay. And with everything else around them, the Broncos are at least in playoff contention until the very end. But that's not enough to where you say, we're going to build around him. And that's where having that extra pick from the Bears could have come in handy. But that one, as you mentioned, is going to belong to the Giants.
Definitely. And one more question before we let you go, Andrew. Who is the better pass blocker, Phillip Lindsay or Tim Tebow?
Oh, I've seen Phil at least be a willing blocker and try, even and effort is half of it, right? And Phil was always willing to give it a shot, even though sometimes he would just get overrun because of the size disadvantage. So I'm still going to say Phillip Lindsay because I haven't seen Tim Tebow try to block. Oh man, that's going to be
that's going to be fun. Interesting. I don't know. Are the Broncos penciled in to face the Jaguars at any point this year?
Week 2, based on the leaks that we've gotten, it's going to be a week 2 game down in Jacksonville. So it's going to be hot. It's going to be steamy. And frankly, I kind of like that for the Broncos. I would have been a bit nervous for them if the game had been week 1, because you wouldn't have had much film on Trevor Lawrence. You just had preseason and that's it. So it's not a lot to go on. But Vic Fangio, who, despite the struggles of the team the last couple of years, is certainly one of the game's great defensive tacticians, still is. He's going to have a game to dissect of Trevor Lawrence. And I think that's going to cause some problems for Lawrence in that game and that pass protection scheme. And if it involves Tim Tebow, we're trying to chip off the edge against Bradley Chubb or Von Miller, good luck, Tim. Don't think it's going to work out well for you.
I'm taking 2 bets in that game. A Tim Tebow catches a pass, a Tim Tebow throws a pass. A touchdown, sorry.
Yeah, that's what you brought Trevor Lawrence in for, right? To have him give up a throw to a 47% career passer like Tim Tebow.
That's a very generous. I was going to say it's very generous that you think he's going to catch a pass as well. Now, I think there's video of he tried to catch one pass in his time at the Jets, and he just totally lost the flight of it. And it's just,
my terrible gambling on this podcast there. So it's going to
continue. It's well established. It's like you just like giving money away to people.
That's a bit of excitement for me.
Hey, the best station in the world is donation.
That's it. Listen, Andrew, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us today. Before we let you go, where can people find your socials in the show?
Okay, you can find me on at Mace Denver on Twitter, and of course my work is at thednvr.com. We're a subscription site that covers all Denver sports. So, of course, right now, if you're into the NBA or the NHL, a lot popping with the Denver Nuggets, Nikola Jokic having an MVP type of season. The Avalanche are poised for a Stanley Cup run here. So a lot of good stuff going on. And then also I do a daily podcast, DNVR Broncos podcast, and also a daily radio show, which you can access worldwide at milehighsports.com. It's from 4 to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So your time, that would be midnight to 2 a.m., I believe. So or
11. I think it's 11 to 1.
11 to 1. My bad. So you know what?
Week 1, when the Giants beat the Broncos, if you need a guest to come on the show, I'm probably available.
I'll keep you in mind. But so yeah, my advice, everyone over on the other side of the Atlantic, is just catch our radio show on podcast form. But the DNVR Broncos podcast, we usually have it posted at about I think about 7 p.m. Britain and Ireland time every day. So check it out there.
Excellent stuff. Listen, Andrew, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us today. We hope you enjoy the rest of the off season, and we hope to speak to you again, if not before the season starts, definitely at some point during it.
Oh, call anytime. Like I said, I apologize for the alarm not going off yesterday, and look forward to talking to you guys again. This is fun.
It's absolutely fine. No problem at all. Listen, guys, that's it for this show today. If you haven't already, can you please like this video and subscribe to the Under Center podcast on YouTube? That's where you will find all of our shows when we put them up every week. Also, on the audio side of things, the exact same thing. Just search Under Center podcast. You'll find us there. Subscribe to it, and you will be given every new show once we upload them as well. While you're at it, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/undercenterpod. The Instagram and Twitter is the exact same, at undercenterpod. You'll find us there. Give us a like and a follow too, which would be great. Jake, thank you as always for popping on.
Thanks very much.
That is it, like I said, for this show, guys. We will speak to you again soon. We'll be talking about another team's off-season needs. But until then, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.